Hello and welcome to my stream and/or live YouTube video on prepping some analog artwork, basically. So this is something I drew for a guest comic for Galactic Dragons by Dana Adnett, which is a wonderful comic, by the way. Um, this is a panel from a story by James Boyd, who also did some of the artwork, and I kind of helped out a little bit with the occasional panel here and there. So anyways, this is a scanned bit of artwork, and if you hear dogs and trucks driving by, I believe that would be the ambient sounds of Bangladesh. That being said, let's get started. So Control A to select everything, Control C to copy everything, and then Control W to close everything. Because I do not like directly editing my source files. This way the original scan is, left to its own devices. I can, use that for other purposes. I mean, I can't think of anything, but the original scan is basically unedited, untouched. So I'm just going to start a new file here. US paper, letter. I think I'm going to go with about 450 dpi because that is fairly good resolution. I'm not sure if... I think most printers generally don't go above 200 to 300 dpi, so 450 is, good enough to smooth things out. CMYK color, because that is how printers work. They basically work with 4 colors, and CMYK basically makes sure that whatever color you have is basically pretty close to how they'll look when they're printed. With RGB colors, you can get, like bright values that look very nice on a screen, but look like utter crap when you print them. Okay, so that being done, D to reset the palette to black and white, Control V to paste the image, Control T for transformation, Alt and Shift. Holding down Alt and Shift kind of gives, like, resizes things to scale instead of just making it, instead of making it slightly... well, it basically just keeps the scale, so you don't get weirdly distorted images that's stretched or squashed or something. Anyway, so moving things around, I think I'm gonna lock the proportion button and resize it to 80. We'll see what happens with 90%. Ideally, this is just one of my habits. I prefer to sort of stick to rounded whole numbers when scaling things. I think it's the results are comparatively better. Once again, that's just my opinion. That's what I feel comfortable with. Control A, Control X, delete the layer because it still had like additional information about pixels that are off screen. Create new layer, line art. What else? Flat color. I don't know if I'll be using this, but anyways, these are the 3 layers I generally start with. It'll make a bit more sense once I actually start using them. Anyway, so this is the channel section, and the thing about channels is channels basically let you select things. And so just as a demonstration, if I select this channel, you can see it's selecting all. It's making a selection. The thing about channels is the way channels work is white is basically 100% selection, black is basically 0% selection. Anything in between is sort of, once again, in between. So Control Alright, Control plus to zoom in a little bit. Control M brings up the curves. And since this is supposed to be just the inks layer, what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of, adjust the brightness and contrast. Well, adjust the curves, basically. So that most of the black is basically as black as can be, and most of the white is about as bright as it can be. And so this is our alpha channel. I just like calling it line art because, habit, naming things kind of makes things easier down the line. Let's just save this. Now, this is basically a redo of sorts because I had originally done this and I screwed up the video, I think, yeah, so I screwed up the video and there was no audio, so this is basically sort of a redo of sorts as well. Anyways, Control I inverts because, like I said, you want the white part is basically the selection. So holding down Control and clicking on the layer here makes a selection. Remember, CMYK is basically the workspace. I'm going to go to the layers, D to, once again, it's just habit since this was selected anyway. Alt backspace to fill, Control D to deselect. I am going to, what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to change the transparency to 95%. Lock the transparency so I can't draw anything in the blank space, and then lock the layer. Oh, this can't be good. So this might not look super different, but basically the thing is the line art layer is, basically only the ink is there. There's no, none of the white parts, none of the white bits. This is a flat color, and for this I think I'm just gonna start off with a bright red because red is going to be the predominant color here, because of the exploding planet here. So it's not like 100% sure about this, but I think red. I think I'm gonna stick to reds and oranges for the most part. And my method, and this isn't necessarily the only method or the only proper way to do anything. You do this. There's different people have their own different preferences, but I like to basically select and fill. So let's see. B to select the brush tool. Q to go into quick mask mode, tab to basically hide the rest of the menu because I don't really need that anymore, and just zoom in and just make a selection. So the nice thing about this is, as I may or may not have mentioned in some of my other streams, is that this is basically well, I like using this because it lets you make selections with the brush tool. So if you make a mistake, you can just sort of color over it with the with black, basically. In quick mask mode, black works as sort of the deselect color. White works as the selection color. And because this is in fact well, I mean, this is supposed to be pure black, so doesn't really matter if you stick to this 100%, but I'm just trying to be a bit more careful around the edges, like this little planet, I suppose, this planet around here. Because also, so for webcomics related projects anyway, I prefer to work freehand. That's just something I feel comfortable with. And funny story, I I'm something of a perfectionist. If I mean, it might not be super apparent. Okay, I'm gonna press X to change the color and sort of deselect a bit, because I think there was an extra bit of selection near the upper right corner. Makes it more selection. So anyways, X again to sort of fix this. I say this is the strength of the quick mask selection method. You know, if I was trying to do this with the lasso tool, I might be, you know, it would take a bit longer. Anyways, like I was saying, I still am, in fact, something of a perfectionist. G for the, you know, for the fill tool. It's in bucket fill mode, so okay, that was a mistake. Why? Okay, contiguous. The contiguous needed to be checked, so Q to go back into the selection mode, gradient fill, and here we have our flat color. Control D to deselect, save, lock the transparency. So, and this is just as a demo, but basically, because the transparency is locked, I can't draw anything outside of this. Like, if there's no, I cannot draw anything into the transparent pixels. So, hey, that's kind of nice. So the explodey bits. Let's see. So this is, right now, this is basically just pure, okay, not pure, but this is basically the brightest red possible on a printer. I think I am going to make, alright, you know what, I think I'm gonna do this with a quick mask tool. Q to go into quick mask, X because yeah, reasons. So as I may have pointed out in some of my other videos, so this is basically, you know, the bulk of the work. Basically just or the bulk of the way I work. So, you know, make a selection, fill it in, you know, make another selection, fill it in again, and there's not much to do here. So anyways, also I think I need to stop saying anyways so much. The thing I was saying with being a perfectionist is that it is, hang on, left bracket to shrink the size of the brush. Since I'm filling things in, might as well, you know, fill out some of these planetary chunks as well. So like I was saying, I'm something of a perfectionist, and especially back when I wasn't drawing on a semi-regular basis, I had a serious problem with, you know, trying to get things to be perfect. And the part of the problem was, you know, it never was perfect enough. I mean, when I was working with something like Adobe Illustrator, I think, well, not I think, I know, it lets you zoom in to, like, you know, 64,000%, and at that level, you know, the details don't matter, because you will not see 64,000% details. The printer, I don't think any printer is actually capable of printing that level of detail. You know, if you're working on a standard size page, you might get, you know, I think of what, but the average is something like 200 dpi, 300. I think if you're trying to be extra fancy, something like, you know, 450 to 600 if you're, you know, being super fancy. And yeah, if you have 450 dots per square inch, you know, as far as the calculations go, that's basically 450% detail, basically. Anything above that, like at 450 dpi, you know, 450% detail of something gets you one dot. So, you know, if that 64,000% detail is not visible anywhere, but somehow, you know, that habit kind of became a bad thing. It just became very prohibitive because I'd get stuck, you know, doing these things. I'd get too caught up in trying to fix details that wouldn't be visible, you know. And so one of the things I ended up doing was to kind of stop and basically just tell myself, you know what, to hell with it, to hell with all these details. You know, just work freehand, try to get things to look as good as you possibly can working freehand, and you know, just let that be, just go with that, you know. And so I did, and it took years, and it felt pretty weird at first, especially because, you know, when you're starting anything, it feels it's I think it's natural to feel kind of strange, and there was that part of my brain that just kept, you know, that was horrified at the prospect of, you know, not being able to meticulously, you know, fix all these details and whatnot. And it's something I, you know, I like to think it's something that I've, you know, managed to sort of overcome. And so yeah, there you go. Okay, so this is basically the initial pass, and I think I missed a spot here. Control D, B. I think I'll just draw it in manually since it's not that difficult. The other thing, if you notice, the edge of this looks kind of weird because, well, it just looks kind of weird because by default the way Photoshop is blending these two layers isn't a very nice looking one. Changing it to multiply fixes that. Once again, lock the layer again. So, okay, we have ourselves a planet. Think I'm gonna go with pure yellow and draw in a bit more details here for the explosion. So, as far as, by the way, as far as equipment goes, I'm using a Wacom Intuos tablet. It's well, I mean, as far as art is concerned, a tablet is basically something I find to be very useful, very helpful, because, you know, the movement of the hand is a lot more natural with a tablet than it is with a mouse. For me, anyways. I mean, you know, there are different people feel comfortable with different things, and, you know, if you have another preferred method or something, that's perfectly fine. You know, there is nothing inherently wrong with anything, and like I said, there is no, like, you know, wrong or right way of doing this. And yeah, so DX to sort of switch to the reset the palette, basically just to get some white color on here. and I'm just filling in some of these explosion midpoints with a bit of white. So we have our exploding planet. If you're joining in right now, this bit of artwork is basically a panel for a black and white comic, written and also partially drawn by my friend James Boyd for the Galactic Dragons webcomic. And if you can check out their website, I believe this has been published. So that being said, okay, I think the description of the video said that this was basically gonna be the prepping of the artwork, but I'm getting a little carried away here, and you know what, I think I'm gonna continue coloring this for a while. So, exploding planet, just making some selections, and the nice thing about rocks is that since they are, an organic shape, I can just, make some selections, and this doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, as far as artwork goes, especially if you're starting out, I think it's easy to kind of look at something and get intimidated and think, well, everything has to be like completely perfect, or everything has to be completely flawless, and it doesn't. Do what you feel you're comfortable with, and hang on. So the other thing is, one of the reasons I like working with CMYK is it kind of helps me stick to like percentages, like 20, 0, 25, 50, 75, 100. It's, and well, like once again, like there's no sort of golden rule for this. Like nobody's gonna say, well, you can't do this, or alright, Alt basically sort of deselects. So I am making little cutouts here, and I think I'm gonna add a bit of shading to the rocks. And as far as coloring is concerned, I think it's also, especially when starting out, I mean, I did this, I was under the impression that shadows had to be basically black. So if you wanted to add like a region that was in shadows, you just added some more black to it, and it's generally not. What you want is you want to make the color darker, but you also want to do that with other colors and not simply black. And since the predominant color here is red, I think I'm going to go with I'm going to darken the color with red, basically. Does this work? No, the highlight doesn't work. So Control Alt Z, I believe, is the way to do things in Photoshop. Go back to the selection. What else? Okay, this is probably going to be yellow. This is probably going to be yellow. I'm just picking up random bits and pieces. Like there's no, no, this star has to be yellow, and like that's I don't know, some kind of a specific constellation or what have you. This is just random bits and pieces. It's just something thrown together. So okay, got my 100% yellow. Contiguous is deselected, so everything is now yellow. Other thing, especially with this, well, okay, with this panel in general, one of the other things I was kind of aiming for from the start was like an old school comic book feel. You know, in case it's not apparent with the artwork itself. So it's hence the color palette to start with, which is why things are, you know, which is why I'm going with the colors I am going with. And so okay, we've got ourselves some nice red and yellow bits. Let's add a hint of blue to it somewhere. So we got that. Okay, let's add a bit of blue here, here, and let's say here. Where does that get us? Huh. Not all that bad, if I do say so myself. So we have an exploding planet. The moon looks weird. So let's fix this. There's, okay, we got our exploding planet chunks. We've got our stellar bits and pieces. I think this nebula, okay, hang on. This is still 100%, yeah. I think this nebula needs a bit of, that's weird. Okay. I think this nebula needs a different color. Yeah. Okay, here we go. So let's start with this nebula as a whole. And as far as I think my coloring philosophy goes, well, not philosophy per se. I think it's more of a workflow. But basically, the other thing is it's easier to cut out. It's easier to sort of cut out chunks and then kind of work on them, rather than let's say, you know, trying to paint in or paint out details all at once. So let's see, do I want this to be, yeah, I think that goes pretty well with it. So, like I said, one of my approaches to this is basically to start with a solid color, and then kind of cut the different bits and pieces and shapes out of it. So, for example, I don't really need to, you know, do a lot of fancy like shape cutting selection things. Yes, that sounds super professional, you know, fancy shape cutting selection things. Anyways, there we go. Does that work? No, it doesn't work. let's make it completely yellow and see what happens. Does that work? Too bright. 50% maybe. Yeah, okay, 50% is good enough. Let's take these sort of side nebulas, I suppose you can call them, and like once again, notice that I'm not really all that concerned about, you know, making a perfect selection around most of these sides. Just sort of bits of it. Like I'm not worried about making, you know, selection on this side of these nebulas, because it's already been sort of selected and cut out. All I'm sort of interested in is this side. This is the part where I have to be careful, because I don't want to cut into this bit of color. And okay, that actually works. In fact, let's do this. I'm gonna turn contiguous back on, because this is probably a situation where it might backfire. Fill this in, fill this in, fill this in, deselect, fill this in, fill this in. And I think this looks comparatively better. I don't know. I don't like this. Yeah. Still don't like this. Like there's like the blue is a bit too much. I think I'm gonna stick with something slightly warm. Yeah, there we go. Nope. There we go. So we have ourselves a nebula. Do I want a... Okay, this planet. So, what do I do with this planet? Let's just give it a slight shadow, and that might be it. Let's see how it's looking right now. Okay, let's save this. Before doing anything else, I think I'm gonna go into some, you know, filter related thingamabobs. Alright, let's get rid of the colored line art, since I'm not using that. So you have the line art, have the flat color, and let's also take the background layer, duplicate it, Control E to merge it. I'm gonna hide all of these. Okay, or you know what? No. I'm not gonna merge these. I'm just gonna merge these. Hide the rest. Go to the channel selection, cyan, filter, pixelate, color halftone. Let's leave things as is. Okay. Magenta, Control F. Yellow, Control F. There should be nothing in black. So we have our cyan, magenta, and yellow. And let's say Control A, and this is basically trying to replicate old school printing mistakes. So let's move the yellow up by a little bit. Let's move the magenta 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 5 bit to the side. And last but not least, let's enable the line art copy. And I think this is the colored version of the exploding planet of the space bees. Huh, the explosion actually looks better, I think, you know. And there you go. This, as they say, is this. So, you know, if you're watching, okay, if you're watching this on live stream on Twitch or on YouTube, thank you for watching. And that's about it. Until next time, you know, see you.